Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the shock that people are pretending to have over the extent of the organizational, um, anarchy is what we're seeing in parts of Minneapolis now. But the organizational structure that's underpinning and putting together these riots. And this organizational infrastructure has been around for a long time. And I just wanted to, there's no shock to me. I've been watching this for years and I'm just an ordinary citizen. But I saw one in Australia years ago and it's just 25 plus years ago now. And just watching it from a hotel balcony, actually, just watching it, I could see the organization and the folks with the bullhorns. They'd been, they were just too well trained. It was too slick, the slogans. And then watching people come around with, who was paying to bring all these people in? Where are they from? It was a decent crowd. I mean, the thousands had come along. How was this possible? It didn't look grassroots. The signs were printed and there were people going around with bottles of water and sandwiches and food and this sort of thing were being supplied at certain way stations, if you like, along the route of the march. There was, portable lavatories in place. So this you could just see this took money, this took organization, this took a lot of putting together. This is not grassroots. And I'm not even tiny bit. Now, this was obvious to me at just first look. So it must have been obvious to many other people. So why was it allowed to go ahead? Why was it not stopped? And given it's over 25 years ago, why was this infrastructure that's surely been well known about all over the Western world? Well, I mean, you don't have these sort of riots in China, for goodness sakes, or North Korea. But here you are in the Western world, the law-abiding, supposedly democratic Western world, and yet these riots are going on. Now, the one I saw, I'm probably a little bit hard pushed to call it a riot. There were some elements in there that got carried away. Otherwise, you'd probably call it a protest. But if you're going blocking city streets, and if you're going and blocking public thoroughfares and harassing people when you don't have a permit from the government or the police to do it, then I do classify it as a riot, maybe lower level. They're not torching the whole town or something, but even so. So what did I notice here? Well, I sort of went out and mingled a little bit, was talking to people, and there were teachers and nurses that were being given time off with pay. Now, this is a little bit different from someone takes a sick day or decides to take a day without pay. Then it's their own time, their own money. But we've got a situation here where these people, teachers and nurses and the like, academics and so on, working in the universities, administration staff working in the universities, they were being encouraged, they were being effectively told to go out and protest. This is about green stuff. This particular one was about green stuff. But they were told to go out and protest, and they were promised to get paid. They would get, hey, you'll get paid. Look, you get a day off, run around, wave some placards, shout a few obscenities, a few profanities, then go home early and you get paid for the whole day. Now, that's very different from someone saying, okay, you go out and do this and you're not going to get paid. And by the way, this will go on your, human resource file that you're a radical activist or something. Then you wouldn't see these people here. But these unions and various other groups, again, the academics and universities, even senior high school students are effectively being told to go out. Even if they're students at university, they're given credit marks and grades for attending a protest. So instead of hitting the books and doing the hard yards and the heavy lifting, well, you go out and do 3 protests and we'll give you a distinction on your, your end of year assessment or your end of year grading. This is how it is. And it was that way back then. I'm assuming it's blossomed and flowered into super anarchy today, as we can see in Minneapolis. But that sort of infrastructure, those sorts of systems are present in place then. Now, they're also using, because the internet wasn't quite as sophisticated back at the time, fairly early days actually, and mobile phones were on a relative basis quite expensive. Not everyone had them. So they're all using internal messaging systems within union groups, offices, universities, schools, and so on. So the government was effectively handing over their communications infrastructure to these activists, so they could all talk to each other and they could all organise, and also the outside agitators were from NGOs, which were relatively new in when I say new, there are NGOs around, but that they were just specifically created for fomenting, political drama and subversion and so on. So, but the NGOs were given full access to all the government communications infrastructure to do their recruiting and to do their radicalising and so on. And I say this was over 25 years ago. So with anybody, I couldn't find a single person that was there actually of their own volition who'd say, you know what, this issue is so important to me, I'm going to go out on the street and go placard waving and screaming and shouting. I couldn't find anybody who fitted that. Maybe there were some. Maybe there's someone that sort of just lived around the corner from where the march was, and they thought, yeah, I'll join that, and I'll get a free sandwich and free bottle of water and so on. But now there was a large park, like a recreational park nearby, where there was a whole lot of buses that were parked there. So people were being bussed in from the suburbs. They weren't coming in on their own or getting the public transport or driving or something like that. Instead, they were being bussed in. So who was paying for these buses? Who was paying for the food? Who was paying for the water? It's bottled water, like a brand name bottled water. Who was paying for all this? Who was paying for the portable lavatories to be put in position? And who was paying to have all those signs printed and the like? And who was paying these agitators? Now, these agitators were professional agitators who moved around to all the Australian cities. One day they're in Sydney, and the next day they're in Perth, and they're in Melbourne the day after that, and Brisbane the following week, and so on and so forth. So they're being, who's paying for that? Who's paying their salaries? Who's paying the plane fares? Who's paying for their hotel bills? Something I noticed about these people, they're not staying in cheap trailer parks or something like that. They're staying in 5-star hotels, these people, and you wouldn't think so, but that's where they're staying, and they're not eating dry moldy bread from yesterday. They're eating the lobster and the all that sort of thing. So they're living very well, and the wine and all the bits and pieces. Somebody has to pay for all that. So where does that money come from? And that's the question I asked back in the day. Back in the time. So I've been looking at this for over 25 years, and the questions I asked then are as valid then as they are now. Where's this money coming from, or why is there no appetite or effort to cut it all off and stop it? There should, all you have to do is cut off the flow of cash, and these people, the whole thing stops. I don't think anybody with that demonstration or protest, whatever you want to call it, that I saw over 25 years ago, I don't think anybody would be there unless A, they were openly and brazenly encouraged, and that they were, in the case of union officials, academics, teachers and the like, nurses, that they were paid to go. So the union has said, no, you go out and do it, you'll be paid, you'll be looked after. Now, I remember as a kid, there was a buddy of mine who, I think he worked for the railways. He went out and became like a railway engineer trainee or whatever they called it at the time. And there was something that the union had suggested that there was, I can't remember what it was now. It was some sort of globo leftist cause, whatever. But he was actually on board with it, as I recall. But he went along without permission. So the officials running the railways, they hadn't given him permission. So he decided to say he was sick, and so he would get paid. Now, he wouldn't have gone if he couldn't have got paid. And somehow it was discovered, or somebody told or informed on whatever. And he was hauled on the coals of this. His pay was docked, and then on top of that, he lost one of his sick days as well. And then told, you do it again, you're out of a job, buddy. That's how serious it was at the time. I mean, boy, have things changed. Instead of somebody being warned, your pay is being docked and you better not do it again. Instead of that, it's the reverse. You can be paid for taking the day off protesting. We'll look after you, and you may even get a promotion, and you may get a credit or a distinction on your college essay, and so on and so forth. So it's the entire infrastructure of government and so on is fully supporting. Now, if you take the thousands of people that were there, I don't know how many there were exactly, and how many, and they were the majority by far of government employees who were being paid. I mean, that alone would run into millions of dollars. So the government, the taxpayer, is subsidising this sort of subversion and anarchy indirectly in this case, but nonetheless still subsidising. But this, I just wanted to make clear, this sort of thing has been around for a long time, and I noticed it over 25 years ago. And when I was telling people about it back then, I was getting laughed at. Yeah, Billy Bob, you're a moron. What are you talking about? What nonsense! But the reality is that it's now mainstream in terms of activism. It's now mainstream, and we see it in Minneapolis. But it's been around for a long time, and no government that I'm aware of, no government has tried to stop it or limit it or control it or punish the public servants or punish those involved. So because they've been able to operate without any accountability, they're emboldened to keep on going, one step further, up to and including total anarchy on the street. And again, it could have been stopped years ago, but nobody did anything. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.